Good morning. It is very, very misty and foggy this morning, but it is so peaceful. So I thought I would read us a little bit more from the book. We're on page 156. We're in habit 3, put first things first. And this part is called What It Takes to Say No. The only place to get time from quadrant 2 in the beginning is from quadrants 3 and 4. You cannot ignore the urgent and important activities of quadrant 1, although it will shrink in size as you spend more time with prevention and preparation in quadrant 2. But the initial time for quadrant 2 has to come out of 3 and 4. You have to be proactive to work on quadrant 2 because quadrants 1 and 3 work on you to say yes to important quadrant 2 priorities. You have to learn to say no to other activities, sometimes apparently urgent things. All right, I'm gonna go back for just a second. Let's see, we're talking about all this quadrant stuff. There we go. Okay, I'm trying to put this rest to see. Just to remind you, here's what those quadrants are and what they're talking about. Let's clear it back up. All right. To say yes to important quadrant 2 priorities, you have to learn to say no to other activities, sometimes apparently urgent things. All right. Some time ago, my wife was invited to serve as chairman of a committee in a community endeavor. She had a number of truly important things that she was trying to work on, and she really didn't want to do it, but she felt pressured into it and finally agreed. Then she called one of her dear friends to ask if she would serve on her committee. Her friend listened for a long time and then said, "Sandra, that sounds like a wonderful project, a really worthy undertaking. I appreciate so much you're inviting me to be a part of it. I feel honored by it. For a number of reasons, I won't be participating myself, but I want you to know how much I appreciate your invitation." Sandra was ready for anything but a pleasant no. She turned to me and sighed. I wish I'd said that. I don't mean to imply that you shouldn't be involved in significant service projects. Those things are important. But you have to decide what your highest priorities are and have the courage, pleasantly, smilingly, non-apologetically, to say no to other things. And the way you do that is by having a bigger yes burning inside. The enemy of the best is often the good. Keep in mind that you are always saying no to something. If it isn't to the apparent urgent things in your life, it is probably to the more fundamental, highly important things. Even when the urgent is good, the good can keep you from your best, keep you from your unique contribution if you let it. When I was director of university relations at a large university, I hired a very talented, proactive, creative writer. One day after he had been on the job for a few months, I went into his office and asked him to work on some urgent matters that were pressing on me. He said, "Stephen, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Just let me share with you my situation." Then he took me over to his wallboard, where he had listed over 24 projects he was working on. Together with performance criteria and deadline dates, It had been clearly negotiated before. He was highly disciplined, which is why I went to see him in the first place. If you want to get something done, give it to a busy man. Then he said, Stephen, to do the jobs that you want done right would take several days. Which of these projects would you like me to delay or cancel to satisfy your request? Well, I didn't want to take the responsibility for that. I didn't want to put a cog in the wheel of one of the most productive people on the staff just because I happened to be managing by crisis at that time. The jobs I wanted done were urgent, but not important. So I went and found another crisis manager and gave the job to him. We say yes or no to things daily, usually many times a day. A center of correct principles and a focus on your personal mission empowers us with wisdom to make those judgments effectively. As I work with different groups, I tell them that the essence of effective time and life management is to organize and execute around balanced priorities. Then I ask this question: if you were to fault yourself in one of these three areas, which would it be? Number 1, the inability to prioritize. Number 2, the inability or desire to organize around those priorities. Or number 3, the lack of discipline to execute around them, to stay with your priorities and organization. Most people say their main fault is a lack of discipline. On deeper thought, I believe that is not the case. The basic problem is that their priorities have not become deeply planted in their hearts and minds. They haven't really internalized habit 2. There are many people who recognize the value of Quadrant 2 activities in their lives, whether they identify them as such or not, and they attempt to give priority to those activities and integrate them into their lives through self-discipline alone. But without a principle center and a personal mission statement, they don't have the necessary foundation to sustain their efforts. They're working on the leaves, on the attitudes and the behaviors of discipline, without even thinking to examine the roots, the basic paradigms from which their natural attitudes and behaviors flow. A Quadrant 2 focus is a paradigm that grows out of a principle center. If you are centered on your spouse, your money, your friends, your pleasure, or any extrinsic factor, you will keep getting thrown back into quadrants 1 and 3, reacting to the outside forces your life is centered on. Even if you're centered on yourself, you'll end up in 1 and 3, reacting to the impulse of the moment. Your independent will alone cannot effectively discipline you against your center. In the words of the architectural maxim, form follows function. Likewise, management follows leadership. The way you spend your time is a result of the way you see your time and the way you really see your priorities. If your priorities grow out of a principle center and a personal mission, if they are deeply planted in your heart and in your mind, you will see Quadrant 2 as a natural, exciting place to invest your time. It's almost impossible to say no to the popularity of Quadrant 3 or to the pleasure of escape to quadrant 4 if you don't have a bigger yes burning inside. Only when you have the self-awareness to examine your program and the imagination and conscience to create a new, unique, principle-centered program to which you can say yes. Only then will you have sufficient independent willpower to say no with a genuine smile to the unimportant. All right, the next part. Moving into quadrant 2. If quadrant 2 activities are clearly the heart of effective personal management, the first things we need to put first, then, how do we organize and execute around those things? The first generation of time management does not even recognize the concept of priority. It gives us notes and to-do lists that we can cross off, and we feel a temporary sense of accomplishment every time we check something off. But no priority is attached to items on the list. In addition, there is no correlation between what's on the list and our ultimate values and purposes in life. We simply respond to whatever penetrates our awareness and apparently needs to be done. Many people manage from this first generation paradigm. It's the course of least resistance. There's no pain or strain. It's fun to go with the flow. Externally imposed disciplines and schedules give people the feeling that they aren't responsible for results. But first generation managers, by definition, are not effective people. They produce very little, and their lifestyle does nothing to build their production capability. Buffeted by outside forces, they are often seen as undependable and irresponsible, and they have very little sense of control and self-esteem. Second generation managers assume a little more control. They plan and schedule in advance and generally are seen as more responsible because they show up when they're supposed to. But again, the activities they schedule have no priority or recognized correlation to deeper values and goals. They have few significant achievements and tend to be schedule-oriented. Third generation managers take a significant step forward. They clarify their values and set goals. They plan each day and prioritize their activities. As I have said, this is where most of the time management field is today. But this third generation has some critical limitations. First, it limits vision. Daily planning often misses important things that can only be seen from a larger perspective. The very language daily planning focuses on the urgent, the now, while third generation prioritization provides order to activity. It doesn't question the essential importance of the activity in the first place. It does not place the activity in the context of principles, personal mission, roles, and goals. The third generation value-driven, daily planning approach basically prioritizes the quadrant 1 and 3 problems and crisis of the day. In addition, the third generation makes no provision for managing roles in a balanced way. It lacks realism, creating the tendency to overschedule the day, resulting in frustration and the desire to occasionally throw away the plan and escape to quadrant 4 and its efficiency. Time management focus tends to strain relationships rather than build them. While each of the 3 generations has recognized the value of some kind of management tool, none has produced a tool that empowers a person to live a principle-centered Quadrant 2 lifestyle. The first generation notepads and to-do lists give us no more than a place to capture those things that penetrate our awareness so we won't forget them. The second generation appointment book and calendars merely provide a place to record our future commitments so that we can be where we have agreed to be at the appropriate time. Even the third generation, with its vast array of planners and materials, focuses primarily on helping people prioritize and plan their quadrants 1 and 3 activities. Though many trainers and consultants recognize the value of quadrant 2 activities, the actual planning tools of the third generation do not facilitate organizing and executing around them. As each generation builds on those that have preceded it, the strengths and some of the tools of each of the first 3 generations provide elemental material for the fourth. But there is an added need for a new dimension, for the paradigm and the implementation that will empower us to move into Quadrant 2, to become principle-centered, and to manage ourselves to do what is truly most important. All right, I'm going to stop there. I'll pick back up. Thank you for being with me. We saw a few birds this morning, a little of that mist going out. Like a whole bunch of birds over here. Having a little bird party. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate you.